This is The Meaningful Way. I'm your host, Luke Iorio. I know one of the things that's meaningful to so many of you as listeners, and it's something that's been incredibly meaningful for myself, is this pursuit of who we truly are. Now, we may hear that expression of be yourself, and unfortunately at times it's probably come off as too much of a platitude or a little bit trite these days. But when we actually look at what's really going on out there, we take a look at the things like, what are the top regrets of those that die? The number one regret that comes back every single time is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And that's what we're in pursuit of, because when we have the ability to find and to share our unique voice, our message, express ourselves truly for who we are and how we want to show up in this world, that's when we feel like we're living in alignment, that we're congruent to who we really are and what we want to put out in the world, the way we want to show up, the life that we want to have and lead ourselves to. And so with that in mind, with that as the backdrop, I wanted to reach out to somebody who I thought could really help us connect to this idea of finding our voice. And I quite literally reached out to the man that has recently written the book on that. Today, our guest is Chris Brogan, the CEO of Owner Media Group, who provides skills for the modern entrepreneur. He's a highly sought-after professional speaker, a New York Times best-selling author of 9 books and counting. His latest is called Finding Your Writing Voice. Chris's clients read like some of the most well-known brand names that are out there, whether it be Disney or Google or GM or Microsoft. He's been on Dr. Phil. He's interviewed Richard Branson for Success Magazine, and he's appeared on the Tony Robbins Money Mastery series as well. But as Chris notes, most importantly, he focuses on providing education and tools to help you make your life and your business thrive by teaching you which actions will get you what you want. And so today we're going to explore that idea of not just finding your writing voice, but finding your voice. And with that in mind, Chris, thank you so much for being here on The Meaningful Way.
Luke, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Maybe a fun place to start would just simply be, tell me something that gets you excited these days.
What gets me excited? More often than not lately, I've been really thinking through what are some of the better ways that a company could treat a customer. And so one of the things that I look for in every given day is I look for some kind of business transaction that I might have and see if there's some way I would have done it better or some way I can improve it. And is there something I can extrapolate on and show other people, hey, this might be helpful. I'll give you a really simple, weird example. Luke, no one's going to believe this when they hear it. I'm at my parents' house a couple days ago, and I have I'm getting ready to take a shower and use the bathroom and all this sort of thing like one might. I have all my stuff sitting on their countertop in their guest bathroom, and my glasses slip off the side of my reading glasses slip off the side of the sink into the toilet as the toilet is flushing. Oh. I literally flushed my prescription glasses down the toilet. No safety net, nothing. We're dead. So I call my glasses company. I'm like, hey, what's the deal? Can I get some new ones? And they're like, sure, 7 to 10 days. Oh. And this sets me off because I'm thinking, in the land of 3D printers, why does it take 10 days? And of course, it's because they send out to a lab, and it's because it's the way it's always been done. And so that kind of thing gets me excited, because then I start saying, how would I design this better? I have just reading glasses, but like if I had full-fledged real live glasses, I guess I'd own a spare or something. Right. But why? Is that because I know that the labs can't do it better? So that's what I look for. I look for, what's a way I can have somebody treat my customer better? Yeah,
it's interesting, because just in thinking about that, I've heard individuals talk about the economy that we have today as a relational economy, and certainly that would apply here, but I also hear you talking about it from the standpoint of the experiential economy and how different that is from how businesses and entrepreneurs have approached things in years past.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the way businesses look at everything is, well, that's just how it is. Yeah. And I just loathe that idea. I've got a lot of friends now who do 3D printing, and it's not like they could be as precise as to make prescription lenses, but it just seems like all this technology is out there, and we're not using it to the best effect to drive better human interactions. And that's what I'm most into.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you, is what meaning to look into, what about this experience, what about this particular circumstance could I have improved or would I do different? What is the meaning that holds for you to look into working that way?
Well, let's start with the business owner itself. That small business where I'm frustrated that it's going to take 7 to 10 days, they're probably not going to get my next order because I'll try to find someone who can replace something faster. So as a small business, the meaning is, how can I improve my customer's experience so that I can, stay in business, stay afloat, get as many customers as I can? We're all told to support local businesses, for instance, but that's not, it's not a given. It's not a religion. You have to actually be able to compete with the big businesses in some way. Yeah. And it might not be that you have the most stock. It might not be that you have, the best price, but maybe it's, personalization and customization. Mm-hmm. So with business and life, the thing I most look for in meaning is, how can I get people to treat the other person like they're the most important part of the story? And I think that if we all looked at business that way, people would do a lot better. I mean, my answer to why I do a lot of what I do in business is I just want more companies to treat my mom better.
That's a great measurement. I like that. Let me spin a little bit off of
Sure.
the phrase you used of part of the story, because obviously the roots of who you are is your background in writing. And that's really a bit of what I wanted to bring up today, is to talk a little bit about finding your voice and the joy of writing that's there, and how do we use that to express ourselves. But I guess maybe let's begin with just how did you discover that joy of writing that you have?
It starts really early for me. My grandfather was a candy salesman up in Augusta, Maine, and he would do this route where he'd go around and check in with his customers and make sure they had enough candy. Well, the kind of places that sold candy, at least back in the 70s, were also the kind of places that sold comic books off a little spinner stand. And so I got a lot of access to a lot of comic books when I went with my gramps. My guess is it wasn't all that profitable for him to take me out on his route, but, he loved me, so he'd take me. And I got a lot of comics. So I learned how to read fairly early through comic books. And I guess from ever since, I always thought the idea of storytelling was something cool. And probably for a lot of decades of my life, I thought I would end up being some kind of comic book writer. But there's a lot fewer of those jobs than there are the kind of work that I like to do. And so I think in learning how to write and tell stories, I've always just been fascinated with, first, the idea of self-expression, but second, the idea that I might be able to unearth some truths that we all share. And I think that we all humans really love to find common ground, as much as we like tribalism too, as much as we like to separate and make people others and make people not. We love to see who's one of us as well. And I think that I found that writing was one really easy avenue to show people, I'm just like you.
That's a great perspective. So when you're moving into this direction, there's obviously writing is not the easiest career path to pursue. And so for those that are out there and they want to pursue a talent, they want to pursue a passion, maybe it's writing or whatever it is, it's something that is not necessarily an easy or proven path for them to go after, not a high probability of success as it were. What advice do you share with them?
I share the same advice a lot when it comes to business, which is there's a big difference between our aptitudes and what someone needs and is willing to pay for. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking for what's the crossroads of that. And people will pay writers, so to speak, but they don't really pay a whole lot for a writer. Right. But they will pay for things like business advice, and they will pay for things like strategy, and they will pay for things like copy and content for marketing purposes. And so I just extrapolated out what I knew how to do as a writer into other ways that were much more weaponized, let's say, that people could then spend some money on. And so I think that a lot of times when we have some particular talent, there is some kind of translatable effect. I mean, even if you do something rather silly, you might be the best balloon animal person in the world, but maybe that tells us that you have great spatial relation skills, and maybe you're somebody who can help with, operations and logistics and organization. There's always some kind of, much more depressing businessy sounding thing you could do with your crazy creative freaky talent.
But I do really, I mean, the underlying premise of what you're sharing, which is, recognizing the talent, the aptitude that is there, and looking at how does that match what the demand is for that's out there. And I think something that I've heard you talk about in different ways, I'd love for you to elaborate on, is that sometimes we get stuck, whether it be writing, speaking, whatever it may be that we want to put out there, we get stuck on this idea of, but this is where my passion is. And I don't want to, I'm not sure how I want to marry that to just what is out there in the marketplace. And so it's almost like we're waiting for this perfect wave of passion to overtake us. That's going to motivate everything. And we're not worried about where the market is. And I'm curious, how do we bridge that? Because I've heard you talk about it much from a different perspective.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who live in their mom's basement who are very passionate. And I say that with all the negativity I can possibly muster. And the reason I say it is because, I had a very personal shift in this space, maybe around 2011, maybe a little earlier or later than that, where I just started realizing, man, all my friends who think, gee whiz, social media is cool, they're all going to be working at Best Buy in a few months, because they just don't have any real business. They love to tweet or whatever they love to do. And I switched everything around in my business. I stopped selling, wild, open-ended fairy pixie dust ideas. And I started saying, look, kids, we've got to do something real here or no one's going to pay for it. And I would say that there are still plenty of people out there that say, if you just follow your dream, for instance, boy, if ever Simon Sinek and I ever get in a room, it's going to be a weird day for me because I'm a big fan of crushing all over his start with why thing. I don't like start with why.
Right.
I was raised by, people who had lives in factories, and my dad worked 4 jobs. My dad never wondered what his why was. Yeah. His why was, I got to feed my family. And so I think that the way I want people to perceive their crazy creativity and all that sort of a thing is there's always some way that you can use some aspect of it to help others and be in service of others. And to me, that's the ultimate golden rule. It's very much like do unto others. It's very much, if you can serve other people, then you're going to find a way to make money. It's Zig Ziglar, right? He said, give enough people what they need and you can have what you want or whatever. Yeah. And I think that that's the way we should be looking at this stuff, Luke. I think it's, use your crazy creative talent. If you're the best Batman impersonator in the world, great, but then go figure out a way to make it part of your livelihood so that you can support the people around you.
So you've used phrases like the crazy creative a few times. I know one of your other ones, which is one of my own personal favorite phrases, is the idea of embrace the weird. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I wrote a whole book called The Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth, and I wrote it for my 2 kids. My kids are weirdos, a lot like me. They couldn't not be weirdos. Basically, they were just bred into this. And it's going to be really hard for them to work in some gray cubicle somewhere. Yeah. And I just made a book about, here's another couple ways you could look at that. When I say embrace the weird, it's really interesting how people develop, at least in the Western culture. I don't know how well this maps to other places, but in the U.S., for instance, we're raised to be as creative as we possibly can and crazy as we possibly can. And then somewhere around 5th grade, we start getting penalized for that. Ages like, 11, 12, we start getting told, don't be that weird. Like you could be kind of weird, but not that weird. And then it goes downhill from there. Yeah. And like by the time we get to high school, we're told to be as absolutely compliant and complacent and just the same as everybody else as we can be. And then, by the time we get to college, we think we're expressing ourselves, but we're just sort of trying on some identities. And we've kind of hidden all of the stuff that made us who we were. And I think that it really takes until somewhere into our mid-40s, sometimes our 50s. Sometimes people tap it a little earlier. Others wait till they're 70-something, that they go, oh, that's so weird. The parts that made me seem the strangest are the best parts of me. Yeah. And I think that so many of us have this problem where we try to supplant or subjugate all the needs that we want in expressing the strange versions of how we see the world. And I think that we end up looking like just every other person. And I gave that up for Lent a very long time ago, and I've never looked back. So I just try to help people understand that you can take those wild colors of who you are as long as they attach to a solid spine of what you want to get done in work.
Well, and what I think, and I know for you, this is something else that it ties into, is that, we hear this idea of, I'm not sure I should write that book, that post, that whatever, because other people have already done it. And that's expressed, we can talk about that in writing, but we can talk about that in a lot of different areas of life. Oh, no, it's already been done before, so I'm not going to do it. And I know you share it from the perspective of much more of whatever it is that you're going to do, whatever you're going to write, go ahead and write it because you haven't done it. Your voice hasn't been shared. And I was wondering if you could share a bit more of how we bring that weird into whatever we do, and that's actually where the passion follows from.
It's interesting because there's always a different way to look at something. And I'm always amazed when people want to stop themselves because they think, oh, well, this guy does that. I look at, for instance, some of the top podcasts. Tim Ferriss, who I'm friendly with, has a very good, long-standing top podcast. I find it rambly as hell. I think Tim is really, really smart. His format is super long and super like drawn out, and I can't stand it. My podcasts are like less than 20 minutes. So Joe Rogan Experience. I think Joe may or may not be interesting. I can't tell you. I only listen to about 10 minutes of what he does. I could say that those people are probably great, and there's a lot of people who think they're wonderful and they're the top handful of podcasts in the world. But someone like me who wants the brief version of it, that's great. Now, somebody must listen to my thing and go, I can't believe Chris only talked to that person for like 11 minutes. I would have loved to hear tons more from that person. Sure. So for instance, that's one simple example. The other is, I think we all come along things from very different perspectives. We see a movie differently. I saw Alien Covenant fairly recently, and I was like, wow, this was great. I love this movie. Lots of people complained. They're like, it's like a more horror version of stuff we've already seen. And I was like, well, you just asked them to make the same movie. You got mad that Prometheus wasn't about aliens. So I guess I'm all over the map with it, Luke. My point, though, is that we all can take just one different angle on something. And we don't have to be all that unique in our angle. We can just say, this is the part I like. You know, the other negative side of this is I tell people to take their own take on things. And don't worry if it's already been said. I'm terrified by just how many people are out there just quoting other people all day.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it feels like a room full of tape recorders. And I think that maybe there's an option that someone can come out there and say they're a very disparate idea. And I'm surely going to get a lot more out of that than I am hearing you quote something Tony Robbins said 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. We're not looking for the cliff notes of what was said and how that gets amalgamated. But it's much more of, well, what was your take? What did that mean to you? What did that provoke for you? Because I think it is, as you said, it's sharing in that perspective, even if that perspective is only 1% different. It's still a perspective that you have uniquely, and somebody's going to appreciate that. So how do we do that? How do we begin to find that perspective? How do we, as you know, literally the book you've written, how do we find our own unique voice?
Yeah, I think part of it comes from your idea of meaningful. I mean, what does it mean to you? When I flushed my glasses down the toilet, you know, there's a lot of different ways that could have gone. If I were a stand-up comic, I would have tried to make a bit out of it. If I were, you know, someone was very pessimistic, I would say, well, that's just another thing that's gone wrong in my life. You know, and I immediately took it to a place where I am with business mindedness, which is like, well, why does it still take 7 to 10 days? This is crazy. So that's one way. One way is just, you know, how does it apply to the way you see the world? And sometimes people think they don't have a view of the world, but they totally have a view of the world. Yeah. They maybe just don't express it that often. They maybe don't think about which lens they're using more often than not. So part of it comes back to a bit of mindfulness. It comes back to looking at yourself a little bit better. Part of it comes from, you know, even if we draft off someone else for a little while, even if we sort of copy the thing that we think is most like us for a little while, it helps. I mean, when I was starting out fiction writing, I was like the clone of the day. I was writing whatever was just like the person I wanted to be. And when Annie Proulx wrote Shipping News, I was like, oh, I would love to write less than 3-word sentences. I'm in. You know, and I think that part of what we do to find ourselves is to see where the echo is from other people we like. And I think the other way is to really get out there and experience a lot more. I read a bunch of different blogs every day. I pay attention to some very disparate sources on places like YouTube. I'm always looking for something that I'm not likely to come across from my other colleagues. And then I say, okay, so now how would I approach this? And I think the last and most important part of finding one's own voice, Luke, is practicing. Yeah. A lot of times people sit around going, man, I'd love to be a great writer. And then they don't write anything. Well, you got to be a really crappy writer for quite a while before you become a great writer. Yeah.
And that, honestly, it's you know, the old expression to do the work that is also so critical, exactly as you said, for practice, which is you've got to go through the iterations so that you can work out what is, and this was actually part of one of my other questions to you, is how do we work out what's in our minds to be able to distinguish what is it that truly is the unique part of our perspective versus, you know, stopping at just quoting somebody else. And so I guess I'm a little curious for you is, you know, what maybe are either the practices or what is it that you've done that helps you really synthesize what, you know, this is my view, and that it's not just that amalgamation or the reframe of the quote that has already been shared 20 million times out there.
You know, the best thing I can think of to answer that, it's a really good question. One of the best ways I can think of to answer it is that I tell people a lot of times that one one thing that I have going differently for me than a lot of people is I expose myself and am exposed to a lot more perspectives than other people. Yeah. I answer my own emails. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day. I am very often brought into, what do you think about this kind of conversations with colleagues and people like that? And I read, like I said, several hundred blog posts a day from about 180 sources right now. And then sort of look at the extrapolation from there. I think that because I get such a volume, I can start to see patterns a little more than other people. So one way to do it is look for patterns in your thinking. You know, it could be, you could do this without one single piece of digital content. I could walk down the street, look at 6 people in a row and go, oh, that's weird. They're all frowning. Does anyone ever walk down the street smiling? And if so, why? Maybe smiling's not all that great. Maybe we don't have to smile. You know, you can pull from wherever you have around you too. I live in a really small town in the northern part of Massachusetts. And when people meet me, they're always like, you must live in a big city. I'm like, no, I kind of don't like big cities. I like visiting them, but it's not my vibe. And then when I'm in a big city though, I love seeing all the ways that it differs from my world. So finding what's alike, finding what's different, and then thinking, why do you care? That's, I think, how we practice that a bit. I think that's how we get that view.
So then just maybe 2 more questions here to wrap up. There's one of the myths that you cover in your latest book, Finding Your Writing Voice, is that myth, and I will freely admit to everybody, I bought this myth hook, line, and sinker for a while, which is that your environment needs to be perfect for you to be able to write. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts a little bit on that, and even more broadly, why, you know, that writing myth is not even just for writers, about how the perfect environment must be in place for us to proceed.
My fiance Jack and I both do a lot with this. It was her idea, something about making excuse removal systems. She's in nutrition and fitness and that sort of a thing, as well as some other subject lines. And she's always listening to people make excuses. Like when she was coaching people on their nutrition, there's always some weird excuse. Well, there was a birthday party or whatever. So finding an excuse removal system is always big in a lot of our pursuits, because we just see that that's how a lot of people live their lives. Yeah. And even my daughter had this paper to write. She starts explaining all these reasons why. I said, these are all horrendous reasons why. You know, couldn't find the plug for your laptop. You know, so go find another device. The house is littered with devices, you know, you get the wrong guy for that one. So I think that one piece of that is if you eliminate the excuses, you're in a better shape. 2 is that if you're living only in a comfort zone of the ideal whatever, then you're always going to fail, because there's a lot of things that are going to break that ideal writing spot. You know, I wrote a module for one of my courses in the McCarran International Airport the other day in Las Vegas, because our flight was delayed. So I finished the module. I wrote the last 2,500 words of my story, the book that I'm writing right now. While I was waiting at a bank, I wrote most of those 2,500 words there. I was waiting to meet somebody and they were late. I think that, you know, use all the tools, use all the devices, use whatever, and just find your way to the end. You know, I always tell people, it's weird how many people are willing to abandon their goals for really strange reasons. It's like saying you're going to go to Vegas and you stop 43 miles outside of Vegas and go, well, that's close enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never do that. But we do that with our goals all the damn time. And so I just figure there's a lot of ways to get around that. And one is to eliminate anything that could possibly be used against you in a court of your mental opinion of excuse.
Fantastic. So I then guess, Chris, to kind of bring this full circle, the name of the show is The Meaningful Way. And I love asking the guests we have on here, what is it that at this point in your life and in your work makes life and work meaningful to you?
It's always the same thing. It's always, I work in service of other people, and I work to help other people realize that they're the person that someone else has been waiting to hear from. I think that a lot of times in life, some 1 or 2 or 3 people in our life put us in a mode where we think we're not worth it. We think that we're stupid, bad, wrong, something, too fat, too skinny, ugly. And our little emotional hang up from some person that, you know, did us wrong on a random day is keeping a lot of other people from the opportunity to do something with us. And I guess I would rather free enough people, because I just feel like I'm being cheated out of the opportunity to learn from somebody because they're still dealing with some bully from 30 years ago. Yeah.
Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming here on The Meaningful Way and sharing your wisdom, your experience, and certainly your stories with all the listeners.
My total pleasure, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening out there, I guess maybe the closing thought I'd love to leave you with is that reminder where Chris was just going, which is that when we don't get over ourselves, whatever the insecurity is, the fear, the block, the excuse, whatever it is, when we don't get over ourselves, it's not only us that we're hurting, it's the person that we could have served if we had only shown up. And so with that in mind, guys, as always, until next time, I wish you the best and continue to enjoy the journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Meaningful Way. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and please subscribe and follow along with all these great guests, their stories and interviews. Also, it helps us a lot if you not only share some of your favorite episodes online, but also provide us feedback. Go into iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app happens to be, and rate the show. Provide us some feedback and let us know how it is that we're doing. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, whether it be with the IPEC Coach Training School, the Live, Lead, Play Network, or even just what's evolving with The Meaningful Way, go on and head on over to lukeiorio.com.